With $800 left to her name and 18 months of solo travel wearing down her body and spirit, Amara Okafor boards a flight to Seoul, knowing dangerous men are tracking her every move. Exhausted beyond reason, she makes a choice that will change everything when she falls asleep on the shoulder of a stranger who happens to be one of the most powerful crime bosses in Asia. At 28, Amara had imagined her backpacking journey across 3 continents would end triumphantly, not desperately. She stood in the Manila airport departure gate, her overstuffed backpack covered in patches from countries that now felt like a lifetime ago, her natural locks pulled back in a fading purple wrap she'd bought in Morocco, her warm brown skin showing the exhaustion of too many sleepless hostel nights and too many cheap meals skipped to save money. The boarding pass in her hand represented her last carefully calculated decision. A 14-hour layover in Seoul before the final connection to Lagos. The cheapest route home. The longest route home. Perhaps the last safe hours before she had to face what waited for her. The phone in her pocket buzzed for the 7th time in an hour. She didn't look at it. She knew who it was. Chidi Okoro didn't give up easily, especially when he believed someone had stolen from him. The $15,000 she'd taken from his apartment hadn't been stealing. It had been survival. Her sister Zainab lying in that Lagos hospital bed, sepsis from a burst appendix, the doctors refusing to operate without payment up front. Chidi's money sitting in his safe, money he'd promised to give her for her family emergency, money he'd then refused when she wouldn't come back to him after the last time he'd grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave finger-shaped bruises that took 2 weeks to fade. She'd taken it. Saved her sister's life, disappeared into her already planned backpacking trip with new urgency. 18 months of staying one country ahead of his network, working odd jobs under the table, sleeping in the cheapest hostels she could find, slowly making her way toward home while her savings dwindled to almost nothing. Now she was out of countries to run to and out of money to run with. For those of you who've ever taken a long international flight when you're completely exhausted, you know that feeling of just wanting to close your eyes for a moment. That moment when you're too tired to care about anything except sleep. Amara felt that exhaustion in her bones as she moved through the boarding line. The aircraft was newer, cleaner than the budget carriers she'd been taking for months. Amara found her seat in the back, a middle seat in a 3-seat row near the rear galley. She squeezed past an elderly Korean woman already settled by the window and collapsed into the worn fabric seat. The backpack went under the seat in front of her, too precious to trust to overhead storage. Everything she owned was in that bag. She noticed him before the plane even finished boarding. He moved through the cabin with a presence that made other passengers instinctively lean away, creating a corridor of space around him even in the cramped economy section. Korean, she registered immediately. Late 30s, perhaps. Dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her entire 18-month travel budget. Dark and perfectly tailored, the kind of clothing that announced wealth and power without needing to shout. His features were sharp, controlled, the bone structure of someone who came from old money or had built something substantial enough to carry that same authority. Dark eyes that missed nothing as they scanned the cabin with clinical precision. What made her sit up straighter was that he was trailed by 3 other men, less expensively dressed, but moving with the same controlled awareness, their eyes constantly scanning, their positions in the cabin clearly deliberate. Security. Private security. On a commercial economy flight. The man in the expensive suit chose a seat in the exit row several rows ahead of her. The emergency exit with extra legroom. His security took seats scattered strategically throughout the surrounding area. One directly behind him. One across the aisle. One 3 rows back with a clear line of sight. This was not a normal passenger. Amara watched him settle into his seat with economical movements, accept a tablet from one of his men, and begin reviewing what looked like financial documents. His hands were steady, elegant, the hands of someone who signed orders and expected them to be followed without question. Even sitting, his posture remained perfect, controlled, ready. She should look away, should focus on her own problems. Should sleep during this flight because she wouldn't sleep once she landed in Lagos and had to face her mother's questions and Chidi's inevitable attempt to find her. But something about the stranger held her attention. Maybe it was the contradiction. Wealth choosing economy. Power traveling commercial. Control sitting among chaos. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration. Amara buckled her seatbelt with numb fingers. The phone buzzed again in her pocket. She pulled it out long enough to see the message preview. Chitty's associate. We know you're traveling through Seoul. You can't hide from what you owe. Her blood turned cold. She powered off the phone completely and shoved it deep into her backpacks in her pocket. The plane taxied, lifted, climbed into gray Manila sky. Amara pressed her forehead against the seat in front of her and tried to will herself into the sleep her body desperately needed. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. 14 hours to Seoul. Another 6-hour layover. Then the flight to Lagos. 20 hours before she had to face everything she'd been running from. 20 hours before Chitty's network would know exactly where to find her, because her name was on that Lagos flight manifest, and his connections ran deep. She should never have come back to his apartment that night. Should have known better than to trust a man whose charm covered violence. Should have saved money differently instead of sending every spare dollar home to her family. Should have. 2 hours into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed for the long Pacific crossing. Most passengers settled into sleep or entertainment screens. The elderly woman beside Amara snored softly against the window. The cabin hummed with engine noise and recycled air. Amara's eyelids grew heavy. Her head nodded forward, jerked back up, nodded again. The exhaustion was overwhelming. 18 months of poor sleep and constant stress finally demanding payment. She tried to stay upright, stay alert, stay in control. Her head tipped slowly to the right and came to rest on something solid, warm, the expensive fabric of a suit jacket. She'd somehow drifted into the aisle, her body seeking any support in its desperate need for rest, and found herself leaning against the shoulder of the man in the exit row seat. Kang Dae-young felt the weight settle against him and went perfectly still. He was not a man accustomed to casual touch. His world was built on distance, respect, fear. People did not approach him without permission, did not touch him without consequence. Even his own family maintained careful boundaries. But this exhausted woman with locks that smelled faintly of coconut oil and airport soap had unconsciously sought him out as a pillow, her breathing already deepening into genuine sleep, her body finally surrendering to the rest it clearly needed. His bodyguard Minho started to rise from his seat behind them, clearly intending to wake her and move her back to her assigned seat. Dae-young raised his left hand slightly, palm out. Stop. Minho froze, settled back into his seat with visible confusion. Dae-young returned his attention to the tablet in his right hand, adjusting his position slightly to accommodate the unexpected weight against his shoulder. He'd noticed her during boarding, noticed the worn backpack, the exhaustion in her dark circled eyes, the way she'd flinched when a male passenger stood too quickly near her row. Noticed the phone she kept ignoring, the tension in her shoulders with each buzz, the careful way she'd powered it off completely with hands that trembled slightly. Someone running, someone afraid, someone at the end of her resources. He knew that particular combination of desperation and determination. Had seen it countless times in his line of work, usually in people who made poor choices born from having no good options left. But there was something different about this woman. The backpack patches from countries across 3 continents suggested someone who'd been traveling extensively. The care she'd taken with her few visible possessions suggested someone who valued what she had. The way she'd pulled her shoulders back and lifted her chin before boarding despite obvious exhaustion suggested someone with pride still intact. Someone strong enough to run for what looked like months. Someone desperate enough to keep running despite having nowhere left to go. Dae-young continued reading his reports one-handed, the other arm remaining perfectly still to avoid disturbing her sleep. The cabin crew began moving through with beverage service. A flight attendant approached their row, saw the sleeping woman draped across his shoulder, opened her mouth to apologize and wake the passenger. Dae-young looked up. His eyes met hers. He said nothing, simply held her gaze with the cold authority that ran criminal operations across 3 countries. Leave her. She needs the rest. He didn't say the words aloud. Didn't need to. The attendant recognized power when she saw it. Recognized the type of passenger who expected their unspoken commands to be followed. She nodded quickly, moved her cart past their row without another word. Dae-young returned to his tablet. The woman on his shoulder shifted slightly, her hand curling against his suit jacket, and settled deeper into sleep with a small sigh that sounded like relief. 3 hours passed. His arm grew stiff from holding position. His shoulder developed an ache from her weight pressing against the same spot. He ignored both. Continued working through financial reports, shipment manifests, personnel updates. All the mundane details of running an empire that most people would never associate with the restaurants and real estate holdings his family publicly owned. Minho caught his eye at one point, raised an eyebrow in question. Dae-Young gave a slight shake of his head. No intervention needed. He studied her face and profile, relaxed in sleep. The exhaustion evident in the dark circles hadn't developed overnight. The worn state of her clothing and bag suggested months of hard travel. The fading bruise on her wrist that he'd noticed during boarding suggested someone had recently grabbed her hard enough to leave marks. The fear with which she'd rejected those repeated phone calls suggested whoever had marked her was still pursuing. The equation was simple. Someone running. Someone dangerous pursuing. Someone who'd traveled halfway around the world trying to escape, but had finally run out of room to run. He'd built his reputation on reading situations quickly and accurately, on recognizing opportunity, on knowing when someone could be useful. This exhausted woman who'd accidentally chosen his shoulder as refuge might be exactly that. And if she wasn't useful, at minimum, he could ensure she wasn't another Min SEO, another woman who needed help that never came in time. The flight attendant returned 2 hours later with immigration forms for Seoul arrival. She glanced at the still sleeping woman, looked to Dae-Young in question. "I'll handle it," he said quietly. His English was perfect, barely accented. The attendant handed him 2 forms and moved on. Dae-Young glanced at the woman's face, still peaceful in sleep, then carefully shifted to access his briefcase with his free hand. He had 14 hours to decide how to approach this. 14 hours to investigate who she was and who was following her. 14 hours before they landed in Seoul, and she either accepted help or made the mistake of trying to continue running alone. He pulled out a business card, elegant black with minimalist silver lettering, and tucked it into the seat pocket in front of her where she'd see it when she woke. Then Kong Dae-Young, head of the Kong family's operations across Seoul, Hong Kong, and Singapore, returned to his work and waited for the exhausted traveler to wake and realize she'd been seen, studied, and judged worthy of an offer she couldn't afford to refuse. Severe turbulence jolted the aircraft without warning. The seatbelt sign chimed urgently. The plane dropped, recovered, shuddered through another pocket of rough air. Amara jerked awake, disoriented, her heart hammering. She was warm, too warm, leaning against something solid that smelled expensive, like cedar, and something sharp and clean she couldn't identify. She pulled back quickly and reality crashed over her in humiliating waves. She'd fallen asleep. On a stranger. On the intimidating man in the expensive suit who traveled with private security. Her face flooded with heat. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, straightening in her seat, pressing herself back toward the middle. "I didn't mean to. I was just so tired. I'm really sorry." Kong Dae-Young set his tablet down on the tray table and turned to face her fully. His expression remained neutral, controlled, but his dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "You needed the rest," he said simply. His voice was low, measured, the kind of voice accustomed to being heard the first time without repetition. "How long have you been traveling?" It wasn't really a question despite the phrasing. More an observation seeking confirmation. Amara tried to smooth her locks, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after sleeping for what felt like hours against this immaculate stranger. 18 months, she admitted. "Backpacking. I'm heading home now." 18 months is a long journey alone. She couldn't read his tone, couldn't tell if it was judgment or curiosity or something else entirely. Yes, well, it was supposed to be an adventure. It turned into something else. The turbulence hit again. The plane bucked. Amara's hands gripped the armrests instinctively. Dae-Young didn't react at all, his body perfectly still, as if aircraft turbulence was beneath his concern. When the shaking subsided, he continued as though they hadn't been interrupted. "Something else, meaning you were running from something rather than running toward adventure." Amara's mouth went dry. She tried to force a casual smile, the deflection she perfected over months of hostile conversations with fellow travelers who asked too many questions. "Just got complicated back home. You know how it is. Needed some space to think." The bruise on your wrist suggests the complications involved someone who doesn't understand the concept of personal space. Her hand moved instinctively to cover her right wrist where the fading yellow-green marks still showed if you knew to look. The concealer had worn off during sleep. I'm clumsy, she said automatically. The lie tasted bitter. Dae-young's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A recognition. A calculation. He leaned back slightly in his exit row seat, giving her space while somehow making the space feel more confined by the weight of his attention. You're not clumsy, he said with absolute certainty. You're careful. I've been watching you since boarding. You check sightlines. You're aware of everyone in your immediate radius. You chose the middle seat in the back despite having options closer to the front because it gives you visibility of the cabin and proximity to the rear exit. Those aren't the habits of someone clumsy. Those are the habits of someone who's learned to stay aware of threats. Amara's heart rate picked up. Who are you? She asked, though she wasn't certain she wanted the answer. Someone who recognizes when a person is running out of options. Your backpack is expensive quality but worn beyond normal travel wear. You're rationing your snacks, eating half now and saving half for later despite obvious hunger. Your ticket has a 14-hour layover in Seoul instead of a direct connection, which saves money but costs time, suggesting money is the priority. And you've ignored 7 phone calls since boarding, each one making you more tense. He paused, letting the observation sink in. So I'll ask directly, how long has someone been putting their hands on you? The question landed like a physical blow. Amara felt tears prick her eyes, fought them back with practiced control. You don't know anything about my situation, she said, but her voice shook slightly, betraying her. I know enough to recognize it, Dae-young replied. His tone remained even, factual, without pity or judgment. Just cold assessment. I know the look of someone who's been grabbed hard enough to bruise. I know the fear that comes with persistent, unwanted contact. I know what it looks like when someone is traveling not toward home, but toward the last place they have left to go. Who are you? Amara asked again, this time with more force. Really? Kang Dae-young. He said it like she should recognize the name. When she didn't react, he added, I handle security and logistics for international business operations, based primarily in Seoul with connections throughout Asia. The vagueness was clearly intentional. Security and logistics. Amara wasn't naive enough to miss the careful wording. The kind of international business that required 3 bodyguards on a commercial flight. The kind of security that involved reading people like open books and making casual observations about threat assessment. Right? She said slowly. And you're in economy because you prefer the exit row legroom. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his controlled features. I prefer to control my own emergency exits. First class doesn't offer that option on this aircraft. Before Amara could respond, her backpack buzzed. The phone she'd powered off must have automatically turned back on. Some setting she'd forgotten to disable. The vibration was loud in the quiet cabin. Insistent. Angry. She reached down to silence it, but Dae-young's hand moved faster, intercepting hers. Not grabbing, just blocking with gentle firmness. Answer it, he said quietly. I want to hear what kind of complications you're running from. No. She pulled her hand back. It's nothing. Just, it's handled. The phone continued buzzing. Other passengers were starting to glance their way. If it's handled, there's no harm in answering, Dae-young observed with that same neutral logic that felt impossible to argue against. Amara's hands trembled as she pulled the phone from her bag. The screen showed a Nigerian number she recognized. Not Chidi directly, but one of his associates, a man named Emeka, who did Chidi's threatening for him. She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the decline button. Answer it, Dae-young said again. Put it on speaker. She didn't know why she obeyed. Maybe because his tone carried the weight of command she'd learned not to resist. Maybe because part of her wanted someone else to hear, to witness, to confirm she wasn't being paranoid or overdramatic. She answered. Put it on speaker with the volume low. Amara, Emeka's voice came through, falsely friendly with an undercurrent of threat. We've been trying to reach you. Chidi is very concerned. He just wants to talk. I told you. I'm not coming back, Amara said, keeping her voice low but firm. Tell Chidi the money was for my sister's medical treatment, not his debt payment. I'm done with this. You took $15,000 that didn't belong to you, Emeka countered, the friendliness evaporating. That makes you a thief. Chitty is being generous offering to just talk. But his patience has limits. We know you're traveling through Seoul. We have eyes everywhere, Amara. You can't hide from what you owe. I don't owe him anything, she said, but her voice cracked. He promised me that money for my sister. He refused to give it when she was dying, so I took it. That's not theft. That's for Chitty to decide when you get home. We'll be seeing you soon. The line went dead. Amara sat frozen, the phone still in her hand, her breathing shallow. The cabin suddenly felt too small, too confined. Chitty had people in Seoul. Of course he did. His import-export business had connections across Asia. She'd known that. Had thought she could slip through unnoticed with a long layover instead of staying overnight. Had convinced herself 14 hours wasn't enough time for anyone to find her. She'd been wrong. Dae-young plucked the phone gently from her grip and examined the call log. Multiple calls from the same Nigerian prefix. Multiple messages. He scrolled through with clinical detachment. Emeka, the one who just called. He works for someone named Chitty Okoro. Import-export businessman with documented connections to various organized networks in West Africa. Not major player, but well-connected enough to be dangerous. Particularly to women he believes have wronged him. Amara's head snapped toward him. How do you? She started, then stopped. Security and logistics. Right. You just happen to know about Nigerian import businessmen. I make it my business to know about people who traffic in threats and violence, Dae-young said calmly. Particularly those who operate in regions that intersect with my own business interests. Chitty Okoro has a reputation. Not a good one. He hurt you. It wasn't a question. Amara didn't bother denying it. She was so tired of lying, of minimizing, of pretending the bruises were accidents, and the fear was paranoia. Yes, she said simply. He hurt me. And when my sister got sick and needed emergency surgery, he promised to help. Then he refused unless I came back to him, moved in with him, gave him what he wanted. So I took the money from his safe and I left. Saved my sister's life and disappeared. That was 18 months ago. I thought I could stay gone long enough for him to forget. Men like Chitty Okoro don't forget, Dae-young observed. They escalate. You took his money. You left him. That's 2 challenges to his control. He'll pursue you until he re-establishes dominance, one way or another. I know, Amara whispered. That's why I kept moving. Kept running. But I'm out of money. Out of countries. I have to go home. To Lagos, where he knows you're arriving. Where his network can intercept you the moment you clear customs. Dae-young's assessment was blunt. You have 14 hours in Seoul before your connecting flight. That's not enough time to rest, but it's more than enough time for Chitty's associates to locate you if they're already watching for you. So what am I supposed to do? Amara asked, hearing the desperation creep into her voice. I can't afford to change my ticket. I can't stay in Seoul. I have nowhere else to go. Dae-young reached into his jacket pocket and extracted a business card, black with minimalist silver lettering in Korean and English. Kong Dae-young, it read, with a Seoul phone number and nothing else. No company name. No title. Just the name and contact. When we land, you'll have a choice, he said, handing her the card. You can go to the transit hotel. Try to hide for 14 hours and hope Chitty's people don't find you. Board your flight to Lagos and hope the authorities or your family can protect you when you arrive. Or you can call this number. I have resources. Safe locations. Methods for handling men who believe their money buys ownership of women. Why would you help me? Amara asked, staring at the card. You don't even know me. Kong Dae-young's expression remained controlled, but something dark flickered in his eyes. Let's just say I have experience with men who hurt women and the consequences of not intervening soon enough. Consider this intervention. What you do with it is your choice. The rest of the flight passed in tense silence. Amara tucked the card into her passport, her mind spinning through impossible calculations. Trust a stranger who radiated danger but offered safety, or trust her own ability to evade Chitty's network for 14 more hours and then somehow survive returning to Lagos, where he had home advantage. There were no good options, only varying degrees of risk. As the plane began its descent into Seoul, the flight attendants collecting customs forms, Dae-young spoke once more without looking at her. You fell asleep on my shoulder because you recognized safety even in your exhaustion. Your instincts are good. Trust them. The wheels touched down with a jolt. The plane taxied to the gate. Amara gathered her backpack with numb hands. Her her body moving through the motions while her mind remained stuck on the choice ahead. The cabin door opened. Passengers began shuffling toward the exit. Dae-Jung stood smoothly, his bodyguards immediately taking position around him. He moved into the aisle, then paused, looking back at her still seated. "The business card is not a one-time offer," he said quietly, "but it does expire when you board that flight to Lagos. Choose wisely, Amara Okafor." He'd never asked her name, had somehow learned it anyway. Security and logistics indeed. Amara watched him disappear down the jet bridge, surrounded by his men, clearly someone important being escorted to wherever important dangerous people went. Then she pulled out the black business card and stared at the silver lettering until it blurred. 14 hours to decide between the devil she knew and the devil who'd let her sleep on his shoulder. 14 hours until her safe options ran out completely. Incheon International Airport sprawled before Amara like a gleaming temple to modernity and efficiency. She moved through immigration in a daze, her passport stamped for a 14-hour transit stay, her feet carrying her toward the signs for transit hotels while her mind remained locked on the black business card burning a hole in her pocket. She could do this. 14 hours in a transit hotel room. Door locked. Order room service. Stay invisible. Board the Lagos flight and deal with Chitty when she landed. Maybe at the airport with security around. Maybe call her uncle who had police connections. Maybe somehow survive this. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from an unknown Korean number. A photo. Her. Walking through the airport terminal. Taken minutes ago based on what she was wearing. Below the photo, a message in English. "We see you, Amara. 14 hours is a long time. Chitty sends his regards." Her blood turned to ice. Her hands started shaking so badly, she nearly dropped the phone. They were here. Already. Watching her. She spun around, scanning the crowded terminal, seeing threats in every male face, every person who glanced her direction. The transit hotel wouldn't save her. A locked door wouldn't stop Chitty's people if they knew which room she was in. The Lagos flight was a guaranteed trap. She had $800 and no options left. Amara pulled out the black business card with trembling fingers and dialed the number. It rang once. Kang Dae-Jung's voice answered, calm and unsurprised. "You received another message." "How did you know?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "Because I know how men like Chitty operate." "Where are you currently?" "Terminal 2, near the transit hotel signs." She was breathing too fast, her chest tight. "They sent me a photo. They're watching me right now. I don't know what to do." "Stay where you are. My car is 3 minutes away. Don't move. Don't engage with anyone. Just stay visible in the public area." "Okay," Amara whispered. "Okay." The line stayed connected. She could hear background noise, the sound of a car door closing, an engine starting. Dae-Jung's voice came through again, still perfectly calm. "Describe what you're wearing." "Blue jacket. Black pants. Purple head wrap. Backpack with patches." "Good. I see you on security feed." 2 minutes. Amara stood frozen in the middle of the terminal, clutching her phone like a lifeline, trying not to look as terrified as she felt. People flowed around her, travelers focused on their own journeys, oblivious to the woman whose safe options had just evaporated. A convoy of 3 black Mercedes sedans pulled up to the arrival curb directly in front of the terminal doors. Illegal parking. Security would normally intervene. But the airport police who started to approach took one look at the vehicles, at the men emerging from them, and stepped back. Power recognized and deferred to. Kang Dae-Jung stepped out of the middle vehicle. He spotted her through the glass doors immediately, his dark eyes locking onto hers. He gestured once. "Come." Amara's feet moved before her brain fully engaged. She pushed through the terminal doors, across the curb, toward the car. One of the bodyguards opened the rear door. Dae-Jung was already inside. She climbed in beside him. The door shut. The convoy pulled away from the curb with smooth precision. "Show me the message," Dae-Jung said without preamble. Amara handed him her phone with hands that still trembled. He examined the photo, the threatening text, his expression remaining neutral but his jaw tightening slightly. He forwarded the message to his own phone, then pulled the battery from hers. "They were tracking you through this. We'll get you a clean phone." He tucked her dead phone into his jacket pocket. The car moved through Seoul traffic with the confidence of vehicles accustomed to right-of-way. Amara stared out the tinted windows at a city she'd never planned to see beyond the airport. modern high-rises, neon signs, a mix of traditional and contemporary architecture flowing past. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "Somewhere Chitty's network cannot reach you." Dae-young glanced at her, assessing. "You made the right choice calling me." "Did I?" Amara asked. She was too exhausted to filter. "I don't know you. I don't know what you want from me. I just know that man's people were watching me in the airport, and I was out of options. For now, what I want is to ensure your safety while I assess the full scope of your situation. After that, we'll discuss terms. But first, you need medical attention, food, and rest." In that order, the convoy turned into an exclusive district, passing through a security checkpoint with guards who clearly recognized the vehicles. Tall walls, manicured landscaping, buildings that screamed wealth in architectural whispers. They pulled up to a gleaming tower, all glass and steel and modern luxury. "This is your residence?" Amara asked, staring up at the building. "One of them." Dae-young exited the vehicle, his bodyguards immediately taking formation around him. He waited for Amara to climb out, then gestured toward the private entrance. The doorman bowed deeply. The elevator required a key card. The ride to the top floor was silent except for the soft mechanical hum. The penthouse doors opened directly into the apartment. No hallway. The entire top floor belonged to this single residence. Amara stood in the massive living room and felt the full weight of the gap between her world and his crash over her. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's skyline in every direction. Minimalist furniture in black and cream, each piece clearly custom and expensive. Art on the walls that looked museum quality. Kitchen with appliances she couldn't name. Gleaming marble and dark wood, and the pervasive sense of wealth beyond anything she'd ever experienced. This wasn't just money. This was power. The kind of power that parked illegally at international airports and had security wave them through. The kind of power that made doormen bow and occupied entire penthouse floors. "Sit," Dae-young said, gesturing to the leather sofa. "I've called my doctor. He'll be here within the hour." "I don't need a doctor," Amara protested automatically. "You haven't slept properly in months. You're malnourished. You have injuries you've been ignoring. Yes, you need a doctor. Non-negotiable." He disappeared down a hallway, returning with a glass of water and what looked like expensive vitamins. "Take these." "When did you last eat a full meal?" "Yesterday morning," Amara admitted. "Maybe. I don't remember." The doctor arrived 40 minutes later, a distinguished older Korean man carrying a medical bag, speaking rapid Korean with Dae-young before switching to English for Amara. "Miss Okafor, I'm Dr. Park. Mr. Kong has asked me to perform a general health assessment. May I examine you?" The examination was thorough and professional. Blood pressure elevated from stress. Weight lower than healthy for her height. Signs of chronic sleep deprivation. The bruises on her wrist, mostly healed but still visible under close inspection. Evidence of minor injuries she'd been ignoring, a poorly healed cut on her ankle, abraded skin on her shoulders from the heavy backpack. Dr. Park spoke to Dae-young in Korean while preparing vitamin injections and prescription bottles. Amara caught words like exhaustion, malnutrition, stress. Dae-young's expression remained neutral, but his hands gripped the back of a chair with white-knuckled intensity. "You need rest and proper nutrition," Dr. Park told her in English, handing her a bag of medications with detailed instructions. "These will help, but mostly you need time to recover. You've been running your body on emergency reserves for too long." After the doctor left, Amara sat on the expensive sofa in this impossible penthouse and felt tears prick her eyes. The adrenaline was wearing off. The exhaustion was overwhelming. She was safe for the moment, but trapped by circumstances she couldn't control with a dangerous stranger who'd somehow become her only option. Dae-young returned from showing the doctor out and found her wiping her eyes quickly, trying to maintain composure. "You should sleep," he said. "Guest room is prepared. We'll talk when you wake." "What do you want from me?" Amara asked. "Really, why are you doing this?" Dae-young was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her with that penetrating intensity. Then he said simply, "Because you fell asleep on my shoulder trusting a stranger to protect you during that vulnerability. And because I failed someone once who needed protection. I won't fail again. Sleep, Amara. We'll discuss details when you're rested enough to think clearly." She wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but her body was shutting down, the stress and fear and exhaustion finally winning. Dae-young showed her to a guest room that was larger than most apartments she'd rented, with an attached bathroom and a bed that looked like a cloud. He left her there with a quiet assurance that she was safe. Amara locked the door, showered for the first time in days with water pressure that actually worked and soap that smelled expensive, collapsed into the bed wearing clean clothes she found in the dresser, clearly purchased new in her size somehow, and slept for 11 hours straight without nightmares for the first time in 18 months. She woke to afternoon sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover. Disoriented, confused. Then memory crashed back. Seoul. Penthouse. Kong Dae-young. Chitty's people watching her at the airport. She emerged from the guest room to find the penthouse quiet. A note on the kitchen counter in precise handwriting. Food in refrigerator. Take what you want. I'll return this evening. We'll talk then. The note was signed with just AK. Amara spent the afternoon in a daze. Ate actual food, vegetables and rice and protein, not the budget noodles and street food she'd been surviving on. Stood at the windows watching Seoul's afternoon transform to evening. Tried to process the impossible situation she'd fallen into. As the sun set, she heard the penthouse door open. Dae-young entered, still in his business suit, looking as controlled and perfect as he had on the plane. He'd clearly been working, handling whatever business powerful, dangerous men handled during regular business hours. You slept, he observed. Good. Are you ready to discuss terms? Terms, Amara repeated. That's very transactional. That's what this is. A transaction. I provide protection and resources. You provide something in return. That's how arrangements work. Dae-young gestured toward his office. Come. We should formalize this properly. His office was dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling windows showing Seoul's nighttime skyline. A massive desk clear of everything except a single folder. He gestured for her to sit in the chair across from him. She sat. He remained standing, a power dynamic she recognized even through her nerves. While you slept, I had my team investigate Chidi Okoro thoroughly. Dae-young opened the folder, revealing printed documents and photographs. He operates import-export business between Nigeria and Asia, primary focus on textiles and small electronics. Legitimate front for less legitimate activities. Money laundering. Smuggling. Some human trafficking connections, mostly exploitation of vulnerable women in his employ. His reputation in Lagos is known. Violent. Possessive. 5 previous girlfriends have filed police reports then withdrawn them, presumably under pressure. You're the first who got away and stayed away. Amara's stomach churned looking at the photographs. Chitty with his charming smile. The smile that had fooled her completely until it was too late. His network extends across West Africa and into several Asian cities, including Seoul, Dae-young continued. He has contacts in the Korean-Nigerian expat community. He's put out word that you owe him money, that you're a thief who betrayed him. He's offering a reward for information on your location. His people were tracking your phone signal, which is how they photographed you at the airport. He knows you're connecting flight information. He'll have someone waiting in Lagos when you land. So I'm trapped, Amara said quietly. You would be, if you were still planning to board that flight. Dae-young closed the folder and looked at her directly. But you're not going to Lagos. You're going to stay here. In Seoul. Under my protection. For a specified period of time, during which you'll provide services I need in exchange for safety and compensation. What kind of services? Amara asked, hating the suspicion in her own voice. Nothing sexual, if that's your concern. Dae-young's tone was matter of fact. I need a translator and cultural liaison. You speak English, Yoruba, French, and basic Arabic from your travels. You've lived across multiple regions for 18 months, understand cultural contexts most of my staff lack. My business requires communication with partners in West Africa, parts of Middle East, some European operations. Your language skills are valuable. Your knowledge of how to navigate different cultures is valuable. That's what I'm purchasing. For how long? 3 years minimum. Dae-young pulled out a contract, professionally printed, clearly prepared by lawyers while she slept. The terms: $100,000 per year, paid monthly. Your sister's remaining medical debts cleared immediately. Secure apartment arranged for your mother and sister in Lagos with ongoing security presence to ensure Chitty doesn't retaliate against your family. New identity documents for you. Legal residency in Korea. Private Korean language instruction. Professional wardrobe appropriate to your new position. Medical care. In exchange, you live in my guest residence here. You provide translation and liaison services as needed. You maintain absolute silence about my business operations, and you demonstrate unwavering loyalty to my interests. That's a lot of money, Amara said slowly. You're worth that much to my operations. And your safety has a price tag. Keeping Chitty away from you requires resources. 3 years is sufficient time to either neutralize his interest or build enough power around you that he wouldn't dare attempt contact. What if I refuse? Then you're free to leave. I'll provide you a new phone, some cash, and you can attempt to hide in Seoul for 14 hours before boarding your Lagos flight. Or attempt some other solution. But the offer expires when you walk out that door. This is one time, Amara. Yes or no? And if I accept, then want to leave before 3 years. Dae-young's expression hardened slightly. If you attempt to leave before contract completion, protection is revoked. Immediately. Your family's security removed. Your finances frozen. And I will personally ensure Chitty Okoro knows exactly where to find you. I don't make threats lightly. Loyalty is purchased and maintained through very clear consequences for betrayal. So I'm trading one cage for another, Amara said. Chitty's violent ownership for your purchased control. The difference is I'm telling you the terms explicitly. I'm paying you fair value for your skills. I'm providing your family genuine security, not predatory debt. And I'm not putting my hands on you in violence or demanding sexual access as payment. These are the boundaries. You know them before agreeing. That's more honesty than Chitty ever offered you. Amara stared at the contract, at the numbers that would change her family's life, at the terms that would cage her own life for 3 years, at the man who somehow represented both her trap and her salvation. I have conditions, she said finally. Dae-young raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating. You said it's a transaction. Transactions can be negotiated. Amara lifted her chin, finding some spark of her old confidence. My family never knows the true source of the money. As far as they're concerned, I got a legitimate translation job with a Korean company. Nothing more. I want weekly video calls with them, private, no monitoring. And if I complete the 3 years successfully, I walk away free with no obligations, no lingering debts, no ties to your business. Clean break. Dae-young considered for a moment, then nodded once. Agreed. Your family receives the acceptable fiction. Your calls remain private unless I have reason to believe you're betraying me. Then monitoring begins. And yes, 3 years of loyal service earns you clean separation. Those terms are acceptable. He pushed the contract across the desk with a pen. Sign, and you begin your new life tonight. Refuse, and you go back to running with nowhere left to run to. Amara picked up the pen. Her hand trembled slightly. She thought about her sister Zainab, alive because she'd been brave enough to take Chitty's money. Thought about her mother who'd sacrificed everything to raise her daughters alone. Thought about the 18 months she'd spent running scared, sleeping in cheap hostels, rationing food, always looking over her shoulder. 3 years of cage in exchange for her family's freedom and her own eventual escape. 3 years with a dangerous man who'd shown more honest consideration in 2 days than Chitty had shown in 2 years. She signed her name at the bottom of the contract. Amara Okafor. The signature felt like both surrender and salvation. Dae-young took the contract, added his own signature, then stood and extended his hand. Welcome to Seoul, Miss Okafor. Your protection begins now. Amara shook his hand, feeling the controlled strength in his grip, and wondered if she'd just made the best decision of her life or signed herself into beautiful captivity with a man whose danger was simply more refined than Chitty's brutality. Either way, she was no longer running. And maybe that was enough for now. The following week passed in a blur of bureaucratic efficiency that only serious money and connections could produce. Amara watched her life transform from the outside, as if observing someone else's fairy tale redemption. New identity documents arrived within 3 days. Korean residency visa. Work permit listing her employer as Kong International Consulting, a legitimate front company with offices in 3 countries. Bank account opened in her new legal name with the first month's payment already deposited. The number on the screen made her dizzy. $8,000 sitting there, more money than she'd seen in years, and it would replenish monthly for the next 36 months. Dae-young's team handled everything with practiced precision. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Jaiwon who clearly knew exactly what kind of business she worked for and accepted it with professional detachment, walked Amara through the documentation process. New passport photos, fingerprints, signatures on forms Amara didn't fully understand, but signed anyway because what choice remained? The apartment for her family came together even faster. Dae-Young showed her photos on his tablet during dinner. A 3-bedroom flat in a secure building in Lagos, gated community with actual working security, the kind of place her mother had dreamed about but never imagined affording. Already furnished. Already arranged. The keys would be delivered to her mother within the week along with a cover story about Amara's new employer providing housing benefits. Your sister's medical debts, Dae-Young said, sliding another document across the table. Cleared in full. The hospital has been paid. I've also established a medical fund for ongoing treatment if needed. Your mother will receive monthly stipend she believes is your salary contribution. The amount is enough to live comfortably without raising suspicion about the source. Amara stared at the payment confirmations, at the evidence that her family's crushing financial burden had evaporated overnight. She felt tears building and fought them back. This is too much, she whispered. It's exactly what was agreed upon in the contract. Dae-Young's tone remained businesslike. Your value to my operations justifies the investment, and your family's security ensures your loyalty. It's practical. But beneath the practical words, Amara caught something else. The way he'd made sure her sister had ongoing medical coverage beyond what the contract specified. The way the monthly stipend for her mother was slightly higher than necessary. Small considerations that suggested this wasn't purely transactional for him either, even if he'd never admit it. She video called her mother that evening, privately in her guest room as promised. Her mother's face filled the screen, older than Amara remembered, worn by years of struggle, but now showing something that looked almost like peace. Amara, my daughter, her mother said in Yoruba, switching between that and English as she always did. You didn't tell me this translation company was so generous. This apartment, it's beautiful. Too beautiful. Are you sure this is real? It's real, Mama. Amara smiled, forcing her voice to stay light and normal. They value language specialists. And Korea is expensive, so they provide good benefits to keep employees. How is Zainab? Strong. Healing. She asks about you every day. When are you coming home to visit? Soon. Amara lied, hoping it would someday be true. I need to establish myself here first. But I'm safe, Mama. I'm eating well. I have a good place to live. You don't need to worry anymore. After the call ended, Amara sat in the expensive guest room and let herself cry quietly. Relief, guilt, gratitude, fear, all of it mixing together until she couldn't separate which emotion dominated. A soft knock on her door. She wiped her eyes quickly. Yes. Dae-Young's voice came through. I'm leaving tea outside your door. Green tea with honey. Dr. Park said it helps with stress. She opened the door after his footsteps retreated to find an expensive ceramic cup steaming on a small tray. The gesture was small, thoughtful, completely unexpected from a man who commanded criminal operations with cold efficiency. She picked up the cup and felt something in her chest shift, some wall she'd been maintaining beginning to develop cracks. Her first actual work assignment came 5 days after signing the contract. Dae-Young's office, late morning, with 2 Korean men in expensive suits and 1 West African man in traditional Nigerian attire sitting around the conference table. Dae-Young introduced her formally. Miss Okafor, my new liaison specialist. She'll be translating and providing cultural context for our discussion. The discussion was about shipping routes, container specifications, port logistics in Lagos and Accra. It all sounded perfectly legitimate until the Nigerian contact mentioned secondary cargo, alternative manifests, and the necessary considerations for ensuring customs flexibility. Then Amara understood exactly what she was translating. Smuggling routes, bribe amounts for port officials, ways to move undeclared goods through West African ports. She kept her expression neutral, her translations precise, her tone professional. When the Nigerian contact made a joke in Yoruba about the quality of Korean whiskey, Amara translated both the words and the humor. When he expressed concern about a rival operation, she conveyed not just the concern but the underlying cultural implications of the challenge to honor and territory. After the meeting concluded and the guests departed, Dae-Young studied her carefully. You understood what you were translating. It wasn't a question. Yes, Amara confirmed. And you said nothing. Asked no questions. Showed no judgment. That was the agreement. Absolute silence about your business operations. She met his gaze steadily. I'm not naive, Mr. Kong. I knew what security and logistics meant when you said it on the plane. I knew what I was signing up for when I accepted your contract. Something like approval flickered across his controlled features. Good. Your discretion is noted and appreciated. You did well today. The cultural context you provided was valuable, particularly regarding the honor challenge. My Korean team wouldn't have caught that nuance. Amara nodded, accepting the praise while trying to ignore how satisfied she felt at earning it. She was working for a criminal, facilitating illegal operations. She should feel guilty, conflicted, morally compromised. Instead, she mostly felt useful for the first time in 18 months. And safe. And like maybe her language skills and cultural knowledge, things she'd spent years developing, actually mattered to someone. The days developed a rhythm. Korean language lessons in the morning with a patient tutor who pretended not to notice when Amara's mind wandered. Translation work is needed, sometimes at the penthouse, sometimes at Dae-Young's actual office building, where she had her own small workspace, and everyone treated her with careful respect. Evenings often found her and Dae-Young sharing dinner, discussing her language progress, his teaching her Korean while she taught him Yoruba phrases. You're terrible at tones, she told him one evening, laughing as he mangled another phrase. Korean doesn't use tones like that, he replied with dignity. My mouth isn't designed for these sounds. Excuses. She demonstrated the proper pronunciation again. Try it. Ikuero. Good morning. Emphasis on the second syllable. He attempted it, came closer this time. Better? Better. She smiled, and realized she'd been smiling more in the past 2 weeks than she had in the past 2 years. Dae-Young started bringing home Nigerian ingredients after asking what foods she missed most. Yams, plantains, palm oil, dried crayfish. Things he had no personal use for, but acquired anyway, stocking the penthouse kitchen so she could cook familiar dishes when homesickness struck. His bodyguards grew accustomed to her presence. Miho, the head of security who'd been on the plane, started greeting her with small nods of acknowledgement. Jaiwon, the assistant, began asking her opinion on cultural matters related to various international deals. Amara found herself settling in, the cage becoming less confining as the days passed. She stopped thinking about the 3-year contract as imprisonment and started thinking about it as simply her life now. Strange, but not entirely unpleasant. One evening, 3 weeks into her new existence, she found Dae-Young on the penthouse terrace overlooking Seoul's glittering nighttime skyline. He stood at the railing, still in his business suit despite the late hour, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his controlled expression showing rare cracks of something that might have been weariness. She joined him at the railing, keeping respectful distance. Long day. They're all long days. He glanced at her. You should be resting. I slept enough. Had a nightmare actually. First one since getting here. Woke up thinking I was still in that hostel in Manila with Chitty's people closing in. Then I remembered where I actually was and fell back asleep. Strange how the brain holds on to fear even when the danger has passed. The fear doesn't pass, Dae-Young said quietly. It just becomes manageable. You learn to function around it instead of being paralyzed by it. Amara studied his profile, the sharp features highlighted by the city lights below, the careful control that never quite slipped. Can I ask you something? You're going to regardless of my permission. She smiled slightly. True. Why did you really help me? You could have left me sleeping on the plane. Could have ignored my situation. You didn't have to investigate Chitty. Didn't have to offer protection. Why go this far for a stranger? Dae-Young took a long drink of his whiskey, silent for a moment. The night air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of the city. Then he spoke, his voice lower than usual, rougher around the edges. I had a younger sister, Mincio. She was 7 years younger than me. Gentle, artistic, everything good in a world that's mostly dark. She loved painting, wanted to study art in Paris, had this way of seeing beauty in things I'd never notice. While I was building the family's operations here in Seoul, expanding into Hong Kong, establishing our presence, I was obsessed with power. With respect. With making the Kong name means something that commanded fear and deference. He paused, his grip on the whiskey glass tightening. Mincio started dating someone when she was 23. I barely noticed. I was in Hong Kong most of the time, managing a territorial dispute, too focused on business to pay attention to my sister's personal life. By the time I came back to Seoul 6 months later, she'd moved in with him. Kim something, I don't even remember his full name. Seemed ordinary, polite when I met him. Had a decent job. Nothing remarkable. Dae-young's jaw clenched. I didn't see what was happening. Didn't notice she'd stopped calling as frequently. Didn't question why she always had excuses for not meeting for dinner. Didn't recognize the signs because I was too busy building an empire to notice my sister was being destroyed. Amara stayed quiet, sensing this was a story he needed to tell without interruption. One night, she called me. 3 in the morning. I was in Hong Kong again, negotiating a shipping contract. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said he'd hurt her badly. Said she was scared. Said she needed help getting away from him. I told her. Dae-young's voice went flat, emotionless. I told her I'd come back to Seoul in 3 days when my business was finished. I told her to go stay with our mother until then. I told her it would be fine. She couldn't wait 3 days. He drained the rest of his whiskey in one swallow. The next morning, her boyfriend came home drunk and angry about something at work. She tried to leave. He stopped her. Violently. She hit her head on the kitchen counter during the struggle. Subdural hematoma. She died before the ambulance arrived. He called it an accident. Claimed she slipped. The evidence suggested otherwise, but his family had connections, made the investigation difficult. I returned to Seoul to bury my sister instead of save her. Dae-young's control was absolute, but his eyes held old pain, carefully contained. I visit her grave every month. Tell her about the business she never cared about. Apologize for choosing expansion over her safety. Promise her I'll never make that mistake again. He turned to face Amara directly. So when I saw that bruise on your wrist, when I heard you tell someone on the phone you weren't coming back to him, when you fell asleep on my shoulder trusting a stranger to protect you during that vulnerability, I saw Mincio. Saw the sister I failed. And I decided I wouldn't fail again. You're not Mincio. You're stronger. You got away when she couldn't. But I can protect you the way I failed to protect her. And maybe that makes the weight of her death slightly more bearable. Amara felt tears on her cheeks, not bothering to wipe them away. I'm sorry about your sister, she said softly. That's a terrible burden to carry. But protecting me won't bring her back. I know. His voice was rough. But it makes me feel less like the brother who let her die alone and scared. So perhaps I'm the one being selfish here. Your safety serves my need for redemption as much as it serves your need for protection. Amara reached out slowly, giving him time to move away if he wanted, and touched his arm. Just a light touch, connection without pressure. So I'm your penance. Dae-young looked down at her hand on his arm, then back to her face. You were. Then you started teaching me Yoruba curse words and laughing at my pronunciation. Started cooking Nigerian food that smells amazing and offering me some even though I said the spice level would kill me. Started asking about my day like you genuinely care about the answer instead of just making polite conversation. You stopped being penance and became something else. What's something else? Amara asked, her heart beating faster. Someone whose happiness matters to me beyond contractual obligation. He said simply. Someone I look for when I come home. Someone whose smile affects my mood in ways that are professionally inconvenient. Someone I'm starting to need instead of just protect. Amara's breath caught. The confession hung between them, dangerous and real. I thought this was just a transaction, she whispered. It was supposed to be. His dark eyes held hers. Turns out I'm terrible at maintaining professional boundaries when the person involved makes me remember what it feels like to have someone to come home to instead of just a residence to return to. They stood there on the terrace, Seoul glittering below them, the carefully maintained distance between employer and employee developing cracks wide enough to let something genuine through. The moment was broken by Miho appearing in the terrace doorway. Boss, he said in Korean, apologetic. We have a situation. Dae-young's expression shifted instantly back to cold control. What situation? Miho glanced at Amara, hesitated. It's about Chidio Koro. Say it, Dae-young commanded. She needs to hear this. He's made contact with someone in the Korean-Nigerian community. One of the restaurant owners in Itaewon. He's offering money for information about an African woman working for a Korean company, arrived about 3 weeks ago, name Amara Okafor. The restaurant owner refused and reported the contact to us through our networks, but others may not be as loyal. Amara's chest tightened. He's still looking. He's escalating. Dae-young corrected. That means he's frustrated. He knows you're in Seoul, but can't locate you. Good. Let him stay frustrated. He looked at Miho. Increase security protocols. I want to know everyone who asks questions about African women in our business circles. Expand our network into the expat communities. And find out who else Chitty has contacted. I want his entire Seoul operation mapped within 48 hours. Understood. Miho disappeared back inside. Dae-young turned back to Amara, reading the fear on her face. He cannot reach you here. My protection is absolute. But this confirms he's not giving up. We need to be prepared for him to make a more direct move. What kind of move? Amara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. The kind where he attempts to force contact or applies pressure to make you come to him willingly. Dae-young's tone was matter of fact, which is why my security will be shadowing you whenever you leave this building. Non-negotiable. Amara nodded, the warmth of their earlier conversation replaced by cold reality. 3 years of this. 3 years of being hunted by one dangerous man while being protected by another. The cage, however comfortable, was still a cage. But as they went back inside, Dae-young's hand settled briefly on her lower back. A gesture of protection and something more, and Amara found herself thinking that maybe some cages were more bearable when you weren't alone inside them. 6 weeks into her new life, Amara made the mistake of feeling safe. She'd accompany Jaiwan to a traditional market in Itaewon, the international district where multiple cultures blended together in a chaotic mix of restaurants, shops, and street vendors. Dae-young had approved the outing with the condition that Miho and another bodyguard shadow them at a discreet distance. Amara had protested the obvious security presence, arguing she needed to feel normal occasionally, and Dae-young had compromised by having the guards dress casually and maintain enough distance to create the illusion of independence. The market was vibrant, alive, full of sounds and smells that reminded her of Lagos markets. West African shops mixed with Korean establishments. She was examining fabric at a Nigerian woman's stall, chatting easily in Yoruba about the quality of the Ankara prints, when she felt it. That prickling awareness of being watched with malicious intent. She turned slowly, scanning the crowded market lane, and locked eyes with a face she recognized from Lagos. Emeka's cousin. One of Chitty's network, a man she'd seen at Chitty's office multiple times, always lurking in the background doing whatever enforcement work Chitty required. Their eyes met. Recognition flared in his expression. His hand moved toward his pocket, pulling out a phone. Amara's heart stopped, then started hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Her breath caught in her throat. Every muscle in her body tensed, prepared to run despite knowing running was useless. Miho materialized beside her instantly, reading her body language, following her line of sight. Problem? He asked quietly in Korean. Him, Amara managed, her voice shaking. Blue jacket. He works for Chitty. Miho spoke rapidly into his earpiece while his partner moved to intercept. But the man was already backing away into the crowd, phone to his ear, talking quickly in what looked like Yoruba. Then he turned and disappeared into the mass of people. We're leaving, Miho said, his hand on Amara's elbow, firm but not rough. Now, the drive back to the penthouse was tense and silent. Amara's hands trembled in her lap. She'd been spotted. After 6 weeks of careful invisibility, Chitty's network had found her. The man would report to Chitty within minutes, would describe her location, her companions, probably even got photos on his phone before retreating. The illusion of safety shattered like glass. They arrived at the building to find security already doubled at the entrance. Miho escorted her directly to the penthouse where Dae-young was waiting, having been notified immediately. He stood by the windows, still in his business suit from whatever meeting he'd been pulled from, his expression carved from ice, but his eyes burning with controlled fury. You're certain it was one of Chitty's people, he said without preamble. Amara nodded, not trusting her voice. Describe him to our sketch artist. Dae-young gestured to a woman with a tablet waiting by the dining table. Every detail you remember. We need positive identification. The process took 30 minutes. Amara described the man's face, his build, distinctive scar on his left cheek, the way he moved. The sketch artist produced a digital rendering that made Amara's stomach clench with recognition. That's him. Dae-young studied the image, then forwarded it to his entire security network with rapid-fire commands in Korean. Locate him. I want to know where he's staying, who he's contacted, what he's reported back. Find him within 2 hours. He turned to Amara, his expression softening slightly. You don't leave this building until this is resolved. Not for work. Not for anything. Non-negotiable. For how long? Amara asked. Until I've eliminated the threat permanently. His tone left no room for argument. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She paced her guest room, her mind spiraling through worst-case scenarios. Chitty knew she was in Seoul now. Knew she was protected by someone with resources. That would only enrage him further, make him more determined to reclaim what he believed he owned. Men like Chitty didn't accept defeat. They escalated. She thought about Daejung's sister Minseo, who'd called for help and received promises of 3 days instead of immediate action. Who'd died waiting for protection that came too late. What if history repeated itself? What if Chitty's response was so violent, so immediate, that even Daejung's considerable power couldn't stop it in time? What if people died because she'd fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder? Around 2 in the morning, the building's alarm system screamed to life. Harsh, piercing, the sound of security breach. Amara's door burst open. Miho, weapon drawn, expression grim. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Mr. Kong. He disappeared. Amara locked the door with shaking hands, then stood in the center of the room listening to her heartbeat thunder in her ears while the alarm continued its relentless shrieking. 15 minutes of terror. Muffled sounds from outside. Shouting in Korean. Movement in the hallway. Then silence. A knock. Daejung's voice. Amara, it's me. You can open the door. She unlocked it to find him standing there, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, expression harder than she'd ever seen it. What happened? She asked. Chitty's men attempted to access the building through the service entrance. 3 of them. They were neutralized by security without violence and are currently being questioned. He stepped into her room, closed the door behind him. They were testing our defenses, seeing if this location is adequately guarded. Chitty is no longer just watching. He's preparing to act. Amara's knees went weak. She sat on the edge of the bed before they could give out entirely. This is my fault. I brought this to your door. You could be hurt because of me. Daejung crossed the room, crouched in front of her so they were eye level. Listen to me carefully. You did not bring this. Chitty brought this. He chose violence. He chose obsession. He chose to hunt you across continents. You made the choice to survive. There's a difference. But you're in danger now because of my choices. I'm always in danger. It's the nature of what I do. His dark eyes held hers steadily. But I choose which dangers are worth the risk. You are worth the risk. What if he escalates further? Amara whispered, voicing the fear that had been eating at her. What if he brings more people? Better weapons? What if someone gets killed because he's trying to get to me? What if you... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the terror that had been building since the market. What if Chitty's brutality found a way through Daejung's control, and she lost the man who'd become far more than her employer? She was crying now, months of held-back fear and stress finally breaking through. Daejung stood, pulled her up with him, and wrapped his arms around her. The first time he'd held her. The first time she'd been in his arms for something other than protection from external threats. She broke down completely against his chest, her body shaking with sobs she'd been suppressing for 6 weeks, for 18 months, for however long she'd been running scared. He held her through it, one hand steady on her back, the other cradling her head, his presence solid and unshakable. When her crying finally subsided to ragged breathing, he spoke quietly into her hair. I told you on the plane that you recognized safety when you fell asleep on me. I recognized something too. Someone worth protecting, worth keeping, worth eliminating threats for. This isn't just about your sister anymore, Amara said against his chest. No, Daejung admitted. This is about you. About us. About the fact that I haven't slept properly since you moved in because I'm listening to make sure you're safe down the hall. About the fact that my day doesn't feel complete until I see you. About the fact that you were supposed to be a 3-year contract and you became necessary in 6 weeks. Amara pulled back enough to look up at his face. Necessary. His expression was raw in a way she'd never seen, control finally cracking. I need you, Amara. Not for translation services or cultural liaison work. I need you teaching me terrible Yoruba pronunciation and laughing when I get it wrong. Need you cooking spicy food that makes my eyes water while claiming it's mild by Nigerian standards. Need you asking about my day like you care about the answer. You stopped being about redemption for Minseo and became about the fact that I'm a better version of myself when you're here. And the thought of Chitty taking you away, is unacceptable. I'm scared, Amara confessed. Not just for me. For you. Chitty is unpredictable. Violent. What if he hurts you? Then he'll discover that men who threaten what's mine don't survive the experience. Daejung's voice went cold, the crime boss fully present. I've been patient because I wanted to give him the opportunity to walk away. That patience ends tonight. Tomorrow, I'm going to make Chitty an offer he cannot refuse. And if he's stupid enough to refuse it anyway, I will systematically dismantle every operation he has in Asia and ensure his Nigerian networks understand that continuing business with him carries consequences. What kind of offer? Amara asked. Financial settlement for his debt claim. $100,000, double what you took. Additional compensation for his wounded pride. In connection to profitable, legitimate Korean import routes that will make him far more money than whatever smuggling operations he currently runs. All of it contingent on him never contacting you again and withdrawing his people from Seoul immediately. And if he refuses, then I demonstrate why the Kong family controls 3 countries' worth of operations while he manages a mid-tier smuggling network in Lagos. Daejung's expression was absolute. I will freeze his Asian accounts, block his shipping routes, inform various authorities about his less legal activities with enough evidence to ensure investigation. Expose his connections to people who don't want that exposure. Within 6 months, his business will be destroyed and his reputation will be worthless. I'm giving him the choice to take the money and walk away wealthy. Most men aren't that stupid. But if he is, I'll ensure he regrets it. Amara should have been horrified. Should have objected to the casual discussion of destroying someone's life, even someone who'd hurt her. Instead, she just felt safe, protected, treasured enough that this dangerous man would wage war on her behalf. Do what you need to do, she said quietly. I trust you. Satisfaction flickered across Daejung's features. He pulled her close again, his arms tightening around her. No one touches what's mine, he murmured against her hair. Chitty is about to learn that lesson permanently. The next morning, Daejung left the penthouse in a dark suit that somehow looked more intimidating than usual, his security team flanking him, his expression carved from stone. He was meeting Chitty personally. Neutral location. Controlled circumstances. One final chance for Chitty to accept the generous offer before consequences escalated. Amara spent 6 hours pacing the penthouse, unable to work, unable to eat, barely able to breathe. Miho remained on site, monitoring communications, providing updates when he could. Boss is at the meeting location. Discussion in progress. No incidents reported. But the words did little to calm her racing heart. What if Chitty brought weapons? What if the meeting turned violent? What if Daejung's control wasn't enough against Chitty's unpredictable brutality? She stood at the windows watching Seoul's afternoon light fade to evening, her reflection ghostly in the glass, and realized with absolute certainty that she loved him. Not gratitude, not dependence. Actual love for the man who'd let her sleep on his shoulder, who'd investigated her danger before she asked, who'd offered protection with explicit terms instead of predatory demands, who'd shared his deepest pain about his sister, who'd held her while she cried, and admitted she'd become necessary to him. If something happened to him because of her, she wouldn't survive it. The contract, the money, the safety, none of it mattered compared to him walking back through that door alive and whole. Just before midnight, she heard the penthouse door open. Her heart leapt. She rushed from the guest room to find Daejung standing in the entryway, suit rumpled for the first time ever, hair slightly disheveled, a cut on his knuckles that suggested the meeting hadn't been entirely verbal, but alive and whole and back. She didn't think, just ran to him, threw her arms around him, held on like he might disappear if she let go. It's done, he said quietly, his arms coming around her. Chitty took the settlement. He's on a flight to Lagos in the morning. I made it very clear that any further contact with you results in his Nigerian operations being exposed to authorities with enough evidence to ensure prosecution. He won't bother you again. Did he hurt you? Amara asked, pulling back to examine the cut on his hand. He attempted to. Daejung's slight smile was cold. He no longer has that ability. The threat is permanently eliminated, Amara. You're safe. Completely. She looked up at his face, at the man who'd just faced down her abuser on her behalf, who'd offered money first and violence second, who'd come back to her whole. Thank you, she whispered. No thanks necessary. His expression softened. You're mine to protect. That's not obligation. That's privilege. And standing there in the penthouse entryway, Amara Okafor, who'd been running scared for 18 months, finally stopped running and let herself fall completely into the dangerous safety of Kang Daejung's arms. Amara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting realization that she was in Daejung's bed, not the guest room. Memory filtered back slowly. After he'd returned from the meeting with Chitty, after she'd thrown herself into his arms with relief that bordered on desperation, they'd stood in the entryway talking until exhaustion won. He'd guided her to his room, given her one of his shirts to sleep in, and held her through the night. Nothing sexual, just presence. Just the comfort of not being alone after terror. She turned her head to find him already awake, propped on one elbow watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. His hair was disheveled from sleep, the controlled perfection temporarily abandoned, making him look younger and somehow more dangerous at the same time. You're staring, she murmured, her voice still rough with sleep. I'm confirming you're real and safe in my bed instead of a projection of what I wanted while dealing with Chitty yesterday. His hand reached out, fingers brushing along her jaw with careful reverence. I spent 6 hours negotiating with a man who hurt you, maintaining control when I wanted to break him for every bruise he ever left on your skin. Came back to find you waiting like you'd been worried. Like my safety mattered to you beyond contractual concern. It does matter, Amara said quietly. More than it should for an employee worried about her employer. You stopped being just an employee the moment you fell asleep on my shoulder, and I chose to let you rest instead of maintaining proper boundaries. Daejung's dark eyes held hers. The contract was supposed to keep this professional. 3 years of mutual benefit with clear separation between protection and personal investment. That separation disappeared somewhere between teaching you Korean and learning that your laugh affects my entire day. The 3-year contract feels insufficient now, Amara admitted, her heart beating faster. It feels wrong. Daejung's thumb traced her cheekbone. 3 years implies an ending. An expiration. I don't want an expiration date on having you here. On coming home to you. On knowing you're safe because you're mine to protect. Yours, Amara repeated softly. Mine. His voice went lower, more intense, the possessive edge she'd heard before, but never directed at her with this much raw honesty. You're mine, Amara. Not because of the contract. Not because I eliminated your threat. Because you trusted me before you knew my name. Because you teach me curse words in Yoruba and laugh when I mispronounce them. Because you cook food that makes my eyes water and claim it's mild. Because when I come home, you're the first person I look for, and seeing you makes this dark world bearable. You're mine. And I need you to understand that's not about control or ownership the way Chitty believed he owned you. That's about the fact that you've become essential to my existence. I'm yours, Amara agreed, her hand reaching up to touch his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. And you're mine. Broken pieces, guilt over your sister, dangerous business and all. You're mine, Daejung. Forever, he said, pulling her closer. Not 3 years. Forever. They stayed in bed longer than either usually would, wrapped around each other, the dangerous crime boss and the woman who'd accidentally become his redemption and then his reason, talking quietly about futures that extended beyond contracts and threats. Later that morning, formal discussion in his office paralleling the proposition scene from 6 weeks ago, but with completely different terms. Daejung sat across from her, but this time he reached for her hand, holding it on the desk between them. I want you to be my wife, Amara. Not my contract employee. Not my protected refugee. My wife. The official partner in my life. The recognized matriarch of the Kang family operations. Your family will be protected by marriage ties, not employment agreements. Your sister's future education, covered. Your mother's home and security, permanent. You will be respected as my equal in standing even if the power that standing is built on remains mine to manage. That's a very different proposition than the contract, Amara said, her voice shaking slightly with emotion she didn't bother hiding. The contract was what I could offer when you were a stranger who needed protection. This is what I'm offering now that you're the woman I love and cannot imagine existing without. Daejung's grip on her hand tightened. I'm asking you to marry me. To stay not for 3 years, but permanently. To build a life here with me that's real and chosen, not just safe and transactional. What about when you have to do dangerous things? Amara asked. When your business requires violence or decisions I don't agree with. What happens to us then? Then you tell me your concerns, and I listen. You provide the moral perspective I sometimes lose in the pursuit of power. And I trust you to understand that some darkness is necessary to protect what matters. We navigate it together instead of you witnessing it from contractual distance. His expression was serious. I won't pretend I'll ever be entirely safe or morally uncomplicated. But I will promise that every dangerous thing I do will be to protect what's ours. Our life. Our family. Our future. Yes, Amara said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Not because I'm grateful for protection or because the contract obligates me. Because I love you. Because you let me sleep on your shoulder and saw me when I was invisible. Because you admitted your sister and your guilt and your need for redemption. Because you faced down my nightmare so I could finally stop running. Yes. The wedding happened 3 months later, smaller than Daejung's status might have warranted, but perfect for what they both wanted. Traditional Korean ceremony in a private venue, both families present. The blend of cultures handled with the same careful consideration Daejung applied to his international operations. Amara's mother and sister flew in from Lagos, installed in a luxury hotel, overwhelmed by the generosity and formality, but clearly delighted that their daughter had found security and love. Zainab, fully recovered and thriving, served as Amara's maid of honor, whispering during preparations that Daejung was intimidating but clearly devoted. He looks at you like you're the only person in any room, Zainab observed, helping adjust Amara's hanbok, the traditional wedding dress adapted to complement her brown skin and natural locks beautifully. That's a man who won't let anything hurt you. He won't, Amara agreed, thinking about everything Daejung had done to ensure that truth. The money paid to Chitty. The networks mobilized. The protection extended. The love offered without reservation once his walls came down. The ceremony was conducted in Korean and English, vows exchanged with Daejung's family and associates bearing witness to the mafia boss claiming his wife formally and publicly. When the officiant pronounced them married, Daejung kissed her with the kind of intensity that made several guests look away, his possession and devotion on full display. At the reception, Amara's mother pulled her aside, speaking in Yoruba with tears in her eyes. He is a good man, your husband. Powerful, yes. Intimidating, certainly. But good. I see how he looks at you. How he ensures you're comfortable before attending to anything else. How his security bows to you with the same respect they show him. You chose well, my daughter. I chose survival, mama. He became everything else after. Amara watched Daejung across the room, deep in conversation with his family elders, commanding respect with effortless authority, but glancing over periodically to check on her. He saved me when I had nowhere left to run. Then he loved me when I'd forgotten what safety felt like. Later, during the traditional Korean portion of the reception, Daejung pulled her aside to a quiet corner, his hand possessive on her waist. Happy, he asked. Overwhelmingly. Amara leaned into him. 6 months ago, I was running out of money and options. Now I'm married to a man who eliminated my nightmares and gave me a future. 6 months ago, I was going through the motions of building an empire without remembering why power mattered. His expression softened in the way it only did for her. Then you fell asleep on my shoulder and reminded me that some things are worth protecting more than territory or profit. You gave me purpose beyond my sister's memory. Gave me a reason to come home that isn't just habit. They stayed at the reception until tradition was satisfied, then returned to the penthouse that was now officially theirs together. Not employer and employee sharing space, but husband and wife building a shared life. The following week, Amara video called her family with Daejung present. Her mother's face filled the screen, Zainab beside her, both settled into the Lagos apartment that no longer felt precarious or temporary, but permanent and secure. We've been talking about starting the small business we always dreamed of, her mother said, excitement clear in her voice. With the monthly support you've arranged, we have enough to invest. Zainab wants to study business management. Everything you've given us, Amara, this opportunity, we won't waste it. You're not wasting anything, mama. You're living the life you deserve. Amara glanced at Daejung beside her. My husband and I are building something here. You're building something there. We're all finally safe enough to dream instead of just survive. After the call ended, Daejung pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her securely. Your family is thriving. Chitty is permanently neutralized. Last report showed him focused entirely on rebuilding his legitimate Lagos operations with the Korean connections I provided, too profitable to risk by violating our agreement. Your safety is absolute. Your future is secured. How does it feel? Amara thought about the question seriously. She'd been running for 18 months, terrified and alone, her life measured in cheap hostels and ration meals and constant fear. She'd boarded a plane to Seoul with $800 and no options. Had fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder out of pure, exhausted desperation. That stranger had become her sanctuary, her protection, her redemption from a life of fear. Her husband. It feels like I can finally breathe, she said quietly. Like the world isn't trying to crush me anymore. Like I have a home instead of just temporary stopping places. Like I'm loved instead of hunted. You are loved, Dae-young confirmed, his voice low and certain against her ear. Fiercely, possessively, permanently. You're the woman who trusted me with your vulnerability and gave me purpose beyond guilt. You're mine, Amara, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. She turned in his arms to face him fully, her hands framing his face. And you're mine, she said firmly. My dangerous husband, who let me sleep on his shoulder. Who investigated my nightmares before I asked. Who paid my abuser to leave me alone instead of just eliminating him violently when that would have been easier. Who admitted you needed me and proved it by building a life so secure that nothing can ever take it from me. You're mine, Dae-young, my sanctuary disguised as a crime boss. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, the possession they both declared made physical. Later, standing at the penthouse windows overlooking Seoul's nighttime skyline, Amara reflected on the impossible journey that had brought her here. She'd walked onto a plane desperate and afraid, carrying everything she owned in a worn backpack, counting down to confronting the man who'd terrorized her. She'd fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder because exhaustion had overridden every survival instinct. That stranger had seen her bruises and recognized her fear, had offered protection with explicit terms, had turned a transaction into devotion, had faced down her abuser and built a fortress around her safety, had admitted she'd become necessary to his existence and asked her to stay forever. She was no longer running, no longer counting dollars or countries or days until some imagined freedom. She was standing in a penthouse that represented security she'd never imagined, beside a man whose dangerous power was wielded entirely in her protection, building a future that felt permanent instead of precarious. Dae-young joined her at the window, his arms settling around her waist with casual possessiveness, pulling her against his side. Thinking, he asked, about how far I've come. 18 months ago, I was in that Manila airport with nowhere safe to go. Now I'm here. Safe. Loved. Home. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You were always brave enough to run. You just needed somewhere worth running to instead of away from. I'm grateful you found me. I'm grateful you let me sleep, Amara replied with a slight smile. Most people would have woken me up. Maintained proper boundaries. You chose protection instead. I chose you, Dae-young corrected. The moment you trusted me with your vulnerability, I chose you. Everything after was just confirming that choice and ensuring nothing could ever take you from me. And standing there overlooking the city that had transformed from layover destination to permanent home, wrapped in the arms of the dangerous man who'd become her sanctuary, Amara Okafor finally understood what it meant to be safe, cherished, and free from the fear that had defined too many years of her life. She'd fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder, woken up to protection, and built a forever with the man who'd proven that some cages, when entered with love and explicit terms, were actually just homes with very good security.